Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
This is the Ask Noah Show. It starts live right now. My name is Noah Chalai. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome into the program, sir.
How's it going, Noah? Welcome back.
I appreciate it. So you have a smart TV. It's not really the smart TV that we're interested in, but it has some really unique features that you've really come to love. Tell me about that.
So one of the things that you may experience if you are watching a movie or a TV show is that the audio track will be quiet or normalized, and then music or like action scenes are just like they blow your eardrums out because they were meant for the theater, and that's part of the big bang effect and like the whole experience. When you have kids and your bedroom is above the kids' bedroom, you probably don't want that to be happening at 11:30 at night because all you're trying to do is watch a movie with your spouse. And so one of the features in the TV that I have has this like nighttime, that's what they actually call it, nighttime normalization for the audio. And it basically flattens that out. Now it's not perfect, but it's really, really good compared to, having to turn up the audio so that you can hear what the characters are saying and then having your entire room shake because, somebody drops a bomb behind the soliloquy, right? So it does a really good job of helping to normalize that.
And this is something that, I think, if you have a TV in your bedroom, do you fall asleep watching TV?
I do.
So I do too. And I know there's somebody out there, and they're right now, Steve, they're writing an email to us to tell us how bad it is and how it interrupts sleep. And I know all of that. The problem is, at this point, it's a 20-year habit. I don't think I can break it. The other part of it is my mind is so active and so racing that if I don't turn something on and suck myself out, all I will do is toss and turn and think about problems and things throughout the day. And so I have to have it as a way to wind down. But like you, I really struggle with the interruption of the dynamic range, you might say, of movies or TV shows or whatever, because it's not really designed to be soothing and put you to sleep. It's designed to be entertaining, whatever else. And so when you told me about this, that was really appealing to me. Here's the other thing that stood out to me. There are really two display manufacturers in the world, and they are LG and Samsung. And so really every other TV uses typically one of those displays and then incorporates them in there. Well, the problem with that is you get a wide range of, we'll say, quality when you're buying some of these other brands. And so I get real hesitant anytime I step outside of one of those two camps. Tell me about the make and model of the TV that's in your bedroom that you like so much.
So this is an LG OLED 55A1 because we love fancy names. It actually had even more behind it, but that's where I kind of clipped it off because I assume that there are regional variances and all that go in those following letters. It's not cheap. This is not a TV that you're going to pick up like the 55-inch TV that is in the basement for the kids. Mm-hmm. That was $200. This is not a $200 TV. But it was one of those things that we took as an investment for my wife and I to watch a movie in bed or watch a TV show together. Because oftentimes that's the only time that we get together is like that 45 minutes to watch an episode of something before bedtime, right? Just how the day goes. So, yeah, I really like it.
I love that. And I also like the fact that it means that this is going to sound a little weird, a little bromancy, but the recommendation means a lot coming from you from the standpoint of you are the opposite. You're the antithesis of a person addicted to a screen, right? And so it gives me a certain amount of peace or maybe a rest of an intrepidation that you would sit down and also wind down by turning a screen on and watching content. And I find shared experiences are a really great way to bond, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm generally not a screen person as a way to wind down. It is So the difference between you and I in this regard is my TV gets turned on so low I can barely hear it. And I'm not actually even looking at the screen. It is, I can't go to sleep with like earbuds or headphones in my ears.
Same.
Right? Otherwise I would be listening to like an audiobook. But the other problem that I have with audiobooks is that when I am sleeping to the noise, it has to be something I'm familiar with that I am not going to pay attention to. Yeah. That's the other thing. So,
otherwise, it distracts you and keeps you up and you get interested in it.
Exactly. Right. And I have maybe a little bit of an audiobook addiction. I think I'm over 400 so far and counting, which means there are some that I've listened to more than a couple of times, but not enough that I would fall under that category of I can sleep to this.
So if people want, if you're interested in a really decent TV, check it out. We'll have the link available at podcast.asknoahshow.com. You can check out the exact TV that Steve has, and you can see what you think. If you're looking for a new TV or looking for a nice upgrade right before the holidays, might be something you want to consider. All right. Sebastian Trzcinski-Clément. He is the engineering director and the head of community team at Canonical and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah show. Sebastian, welcome into the program.
Thank you for having me.
So take me back to 2008. You had just gotten hired by Google and you wanted to introduce your grandfather, who is at this point in his 80s and a retired teacher, to computers. Why did you reach for Linux?
Very good question. Indeed, I had been hired by Google the year before, and in 2008, I had noticed that my grandfather, who was living quite far away from where I was based in the suburbs of Paris, was still using these old digital typewriters, not the mechanical ones, but the digital typewriters, these 2-line LCD screens. And I wanted to find a way to connect with him with, video conference meetings so I could see him and hear from him and his personal stories and just connect with him. Time was passing. He was already 85 years old, or almost 85. And the situation was as follows. Well, what kind of computer can I buy? There's Windows. Well, I was worried that for someone who's never experienced an operating system with a graphical interface, that with the pop-ups and the windows and security updates and viruses, I thought that would be a terrible choice for him to get Windows. He'd tell me, no, I don't want to deal with this. So Windows was out of the question. Mac, yeah, would have been a great option, except I didn't have a lot of money back then. I just had started at Google, and back then they were giving stock options, which were underwater. Thank you very much, Google stock back then. They were repriced, so I can't complain, and I had a good run with Google, so I'm very thankful. But back then, I didn't have that much money to spend on a brand new Mac for my grandfather. So last option that I was considering, Linux. And I knew nothing about Linux, so I searched online. I can't remember which forums I was on. And I see this company, Canonical, never heard of them. I think at the time they were just like 4 years old. And they was doing these thing like Ubuntu, and they were shipping CDs, installation CDs for Ubuntu. I think it was Hardy Heron. I still remember the name of the release back then. So I, out of greed, I guess, because I'm thinking already, they're never going to ship me a second one, so I'm going to ask for 2 CDs at the same time. And guess what? I think a few weeks later, I get the CDs in the mail in France. I live in France. Like, really? I know now in hindsight how Mark Shuttleworth, the CEO and founder of Canonical, spent millions of this, of his personal money, obviously, into this. But I really think this was like the aha moment, at least for me, and getting enamored with this company and this distro that I had never heard about. So I install Ubuntu on an old computer that I had at home, and it works. It works fresh off the bat, which I did not expect. I do think I had maybe an issue with a driver, maybe with an audio chipset or something. But again, there was tons of help online, the community, as we like to talk about. And I found the solution, and it was just working. That's it. That's the story, how I got my grandfather on Ubuntu. And I kind of forgot about it because it just worked and could do video conferencing with him.
So you get your grandfather on Ubuntu, and your career progresses at Google to the point that you get hired by a boss by the name of Nelson. Tell me about Nelson.
Nelson Matos. hopefully he's going to hear this, so I'm going to send him the episode. Nelson, I don't know where to start. So Nelson joins Google in 2007. Actually, the same year I joined Google. Maybe he joins in April 2007, if I remember correctly. He was not my boss back then, but there was an internal job posting. And I was working out of Google's Paris office. And the job posting was for a chief of staff role, quite unique in the company back then. It was based in Zurich, in Google's engineering office, main engineering office on the European continent. And I thought, oh, that's me. Like, I'm a jack of all trades. You know, I'm an engineer by background. I also got an MBA. I kind of do like X, Y, and Z. I don't really know what I want to do in life. That sounds like me. So I interview. He picks me, and I try to negotiate not to go to Zurich because I come from Paris, and yeah, Paris is obviously the most beautiful city in the world. I mean, who would disagree? I'm a Frenchman. I'm arrogant, right? That goes together. I'm joking, obviously. Paris is nice, but I did not really want to move to Zurich. But the job was there. I had to move grudgingly. It's actually the best decision I've ever made in hindsight. So thank you, Nelson. And he was back then the VP of Engineering and Product Management for all over Europe, and soon to be the VP for Emerging Markets at Google. Or it shaped my career. And maybe the bit that you may want to know is that initially I was his chief of staff. And to cut the story short is that after a couple of years working for him, I was struggling to get promoted. Not that he was unhappy with my work, but the way promotion committees work at Google, and still the way they roughly work today, is a promotion committee. Your manager, at least back then, would not decide on whether you get promoted or not. It's an independent committee. You don't know who's on it, and they review your manager's assessment of you and your performance and your peers and everything. I don't get promoted one time. I don't get promoted a second time, despite glowing reviews. I don't get promoted a third time. Nelson comes to me and says, Sebastian, these guys in the US, they don't understand what you do. They think you're a super admin. They don't understand the distinction between an executive assistant, he had two, by the way, right, and a chief of staff. So he tells me, you have to choose three things. I still want you as a chief of staff, but you're going to do some extra work, right? So they understand, and we're going to focus your work, at least the visible part of your work, on these extra things you're going to do. Choose between developer outreach in sub-Saharan Africa, university outreach in sub-Saharan Africa, or developer outreach in the Middle East and North Africa. I kind of pick a bit randomly. I knew that I loved coding on the side, so I thought I would evolve more towards developer outreach more than university outreach. So I picked developer outreach in the Middle East and Northern Africa. That was 2010. That's when I was asked within a few weeks to host two major conferences for Google, the G-Days, for those who may remember, because there was a whole series of them in about 40 countries after that, starting with two events in Cairo in Egypt and Amman in Jordan. And that led me to where I am today. From 2010 to 2025, I've stayed in that world of developer advocacy, working with communities, listening to the community on how we can do a better job wherever I work for. This has been my calling, basically.
So take me back to the conference. So you are going to do this developer outreach, and you go into Jordan, and you're supposedly going to put this conference together. How'd the conference go?
The conference is a bit of a nightmare for me because it's December 2010, and believe it or not, and I did not know that, because for me the Middle East, I imagine palm trees and the sand and the desert, and it's like super hot. It's actually snowing. There are mountains in different parts of the Middle East, and it is snowing between Syria and Jordan. And I'm expecting attendees from northern Jordan, from Syria. They're stuck at the border. I get messages. They're not on time. It's raining in Amman. Like typical event logistical issues. Microphones don't seem to be working. I can't remember the details. Clickers, are too hard to press. It's a bit of a nightmare. I don't sleep much. Obviously, I cut myself while shaving in the morning, and that's why I've decided that from that day onwards, I will never have a clean cut shave for events, risking to cut myself and come with plasters all over my face. So it's a bit of a nightmare, but it actually goes super well. We have thousands of attendees coming for a 3-day event. We have the Jordanian Minister of Telecommunication at the time, obviously, coming also to give a speech. And there's just a high level of energy. It's very heartwarming to see the connection, right, between attendees and people coming from Google, the speakers coming from all over the world. You have to realize that, at least at the time, and I have actually an interesting story with the Arab Spring the year after, that it's not necessarily every day that big tech companies will take the trouble to go to developed countries or smaller countries. Like, not many people have traveled to Jordan, right? Not many people may actually know where is Jordan on the map. So you have to realize that, trying to bring that opportunity is, a big thing for developers out there, right? And I want to be humble. I want to say like, oh, we're like saviors or anything, but it's very inspiring, right? To see the level of interest and the amazing entrepreneurship that exists everywhere in the world, where opportunities may not be as prominent and obvious as in major hubs like Silicon Valley for the obvious one, but also London or Paris or Zurich for that matter. So in the end, it's a massive success, and we carry on giving these massive events year after year for a number of years, and we expand to a number of countries.
Who was Abdullah, and why did he leave an impression on you?
Abdullah Suleiman. Abdullah was the last problem I wanted to deal with in December 2010, as the event was about to start. He had been emailing me for weeks. He wanted to attend the event, but the problem was he was, in 2010, 14 years old. And it was my first event ever, right? It's like difficult to imagine about all the logistics. I don't want to deal with a kid. And the policy was very clear. No kids. It's just extra liability. I don't want to handle the risk of anything happening. He shows up. He's there in person at the registration desk. He knows, he figures out who I am. And like he has this desperate look on his face. And he's begging and like I'm thinking, what do I do? Like he's here. I can't say no. Like he's breaking my heart. Now his father's next to him. So on the spur of the moment, I think, all right, I talk to his father. Abdullah is next to him. And I say, fine, he can come to the event, but you as his father need to be with him the entire day, no exception. And I just see there's the relief that the father has, and the face lighting up on the face of Abdullah. I forget about him, nothing happens. 10 years later, it's 2020, and I guess a lot of people remember 2020 rhymes with the pandemic. It's another type of chaos, not an event. It's a global scale chaos. And we're working from home, and obviously I'm on my email and dealing with anxiety and video conferences, and this is what happens day in, day out. And I get an email, and I see Abdullah. It goes like this. Sebastian, you may not remember me. Abdullah, of course I remember you. I was that 14-year-old kid 10 years ago, and you let me into that conference in Amman. And it changed my life. Attending these talks, being allowed to go to that event, transformed me. I'm a software engineer today, and it's the reason why I do what I do. Right? And I had goosebumps, when I was reading this. It's not, I get a few nice emails here and then, but sometimes you never know if it's someone who's, just trying to be nice because they want a job at Google or something else. So these emails are a treasure, and I have goosebumps, and I thought, this is the reason why I do this job, right? Like planting seeds and trying to see, hopefully I get to see these seeds, bloom. It's not about actually the big picture or the technology. It's really trying to bring these opportunities, and you may not even know whose life you're inspiring. So that's the story of Abdullah. But it's a story of everybody, right, who's been given a chance. I was given a chance by Nelson. I was just describing my background. It's the best thing that happened to me. I moved to Switzerland. I became a Swiss citizen. Actually, very difficult process to become a citizen in Switzerland. I find my calling at Google to do developer outreach. It leads me to Canonical afterwards. So you never know how life is going to be, what opportunities life is going to present you with. So seize them when you see them. You may not be lucky. It may take time.
It's 2025. We are at Ubuntu Summit 2510. Tell me how you got from 2020 working at home to working at Canonical, and why?
It's a very good question. Google has and remains an active advocate of open source. It open sources a lot of its code. And come the end of 2020, the same year, it's actually an interesting coincidence, I realized something that was, I think, fairly obvious in hindsight, which was the following. Google has a number of APIs and SDKs and products for developers and tools. Things like today, the Gemini API or Firebase or Android as an SDK. And I realized we had no examples from the community on amazing projects built on top of these SDKs. Yeah, sometimes you had an example out there, but it was not with a stamp of approval by Google saying, look, this is a role model. This is an interesting example. Like, get inspired by this. We're not certifying it, but saying it's great. So I came up with a concept that is still online today. It's called the Developer Library, and it's today at devlibrary.withgoogle.com. And I realized it could be great to inspire fellow developers with showcases of the work that they do. But to take it a step further, I really want to emphasize how they use Google technologies in open source projects, because it's disheartening if you see a project that is inspiring, but then you can't use it. Right? Yeah, you can play with it, but you can't remix it or use it as a library in whatever you're building. So I thought, let's take it a step further. And that's how the project was born, and how I guess, even more involved into the open source area. Interviewing, just like you're doing with me, with these short videos, the actual developers whose projects we had curated, who Google engineers, experts of the various products had taken the trouble to curate that content. So I think I did about 12 or 15 video interviews. Men, women developers from different backgrounds, different geographic, from Nigeria to Pakistan to the US, amazing backgrounds, and trying to inspire fellow developers. And I think that I carried this project forward over the years, and yeah, then I saw a job posting early 2024 that Canonical was looking for a director of engineering to lead community, and I thought, hang on, like, maybe I could be doing this. Like I had this story with my grandfather with Ubuntu, so it was close to my heart, but I had forgotten about this. And then I was doing Dev Library, which was open source stuff, which was also close to my heart, because you can feel that connection when you talk to someone, even more in person as we're doing right now, but also through a video interview. Sometimes you can feel that connection. Oh wow, this is so inspiring. I was, very often at conferences, and I was trying to invite startup founders. I wanted to jump ship every time because I was just so excited by the product they were building. I thought, I want to work with them. I want to quit my job every time I get so inspired. It's the same thing when I talk to people. So these two things, I think, came together at the right time. And I thought, maybe I could have a bit more of the power I was seeking at Google, to be completely frank with you, and do this at Canonical. Right? I have in my scope, but I want to do more at Google, and for various reasons and disagreements, I could not do everything I wanted to do. So I thought maybe, it's not Google, it's not the same scale, not the same budget, not the same size of the teams. And I loved my team at Google. Really, really had a great run with them. But I thought maybe it was a good time also to start something else with Canonical.
What is the Ubuntu Summit for somebody who hasn't heard of it, and how is it different from past years?
So what is the Ubuntu Summit? And you mentioned it, we just closed off the Summit 2510. For those who are not familiar with the naming, 2510 is an echo to the releases of Ubuntu. Ubuntu releases a new version of its distro every 6 months. And we use the last 2 digits of the year, so 2025, it's 25, and the digits of the month for the release. So that's why 2510. And the reason we're calling it Summit 2510 is we just do this right after the release, right? So we're trying to get the momentum, the excitement around the latest release, and we have this summit. And there's a bit of confusion indeed, because for some old-timers in the community, it was very much of a community grassroots event. And it may not seem as much this way, but I'll be completely frank with you, right? Mark has a vision, Mark Shuttleworth, the CEO and founder, and he really wants to bring together the brightest minds of open source. As long as they're not antagonistic, obviously, with Canonical and saying bad things. I mean, who would be dumb enough, right? But we welcome people who are kind of competing, or the perceived opponents, Microsoft, right? The bad, ugly Microsoft from 20 years ago. I love it that we have speakers from Microsoft working on open source, right? That is just, again, another example of feeling these goosebumps that we don't need to fight. There's so many areas of common ground, of things that we can work on together. So Mark has this vision, which I completely subscribe to, that we need to bring the best minds together. People who say, I see this speaker at this event, I want to be there too, exchange ideas, and then we work on something together. A perfect example of this is Moonray, right? DreamWorks was giving a talk at the past summit, and this led to the collaboration and the hackathon that they had just one day before the summit this time around. This is what we want to see more of, right? The brightest minds together. Now, we have, to be completely honest with you, logistical challenge. We are hosting this in Canonical's only, or one of the very few spaces, because if people don't know, Canonical is actually a remote-only company from the very beginning. We all work from home, almost. There's some tiny exception. So we're 1,300 employees working from home. So we don't have offices. It's a tiny space here in London that Mark personally designed with architects. It's his baby, right? And it's happening here. And there's something as simple as fire and safety regulation. We can only have so many people here. I'd love to bring anybody and say, look, it's an open event. You can come. It's free. It is a free event for those who are lucky enough to be coming here. But it's a small place, so we cannot have everybody. Now, there were various suggestions when I just arrived in my job about doing things with a stream that would be in a nearby conference hall, and I thought that would be a terrible experience because why would I bother going to a hall and see something on the screen, which I can do at home or in my local community? So that's why we just re-engineered the whole thing, that we keep the focus on fantastic, high-quality content, which is a difficult bar to meet, and hopefully we met it this time, and we'll keep on increasing the quality every time, and really make it a community-wide event with extended versions of the summit. So I know some of these events, I think there's about 15 of them, some synchronous, some asynchronous, happening in the next few days and weeks, where they're going to replace some of the content. And the idea is to make it as simple as easy for anybody to just host an event, gather with a bunch of friends, watch the content, have a hackathon, have other talks, a bit like TEDx, TED and TEDx, have your own thing. And that's the spirit, right? My key role is really to be focused on the community, right? The event itself is, you could think, it's a lot of event management, and it's not I'm not going to say it's not my cup of tea. I've been doing this for a long time, but I really want to focus on the community angle of things, right? That's why I emphasize so much, and I hope those who may be watching the replay will notice this when the speakers or the MCs or myself were speaking, saying, and we have the live audience, and we paid special interest, special attention with taking questions that were posted on the discourse, first and foremost, before taking questions in the room. That's a way to be inclusive and to show that you can be at home. You may not have the opportunity or a visa to come to the UK. It's okay. You're part of our community. Of course, I'd love for you to come here and even spend Canonical's money, Mark's money, right, to sponsor your flight ticket. But we can't do this for everybody, right? It's maths, right? And that's why, back to the point, when we were talking off the record, I know some purists may have a problem with making money in the open source world, but we have to be realistic, right? And I think if something can pay the bills to do more for the open source community and indeed have more of these events, in fact, Mark was very clear with me, says, yes, you convinced me that we should not have a stream in a nearby hotel conference hall because it makes no sense. Instead, he's happy to sponsor, to the extent that we can, all these extended events. So if you're hearing this and you want to have a local community, which is hosting an extended event in the future, you want to host a meetup, reach out to us, community@canonical.com, and we'll see what we can do. I'm not promising the moon, but Mark personally is invested in this, right? He wants to see the community bloom. In fact, what is very inspiring for me when I hear Mark is that it's not just about Ubuntu. Despite the name Ubuntu Summit, which is a nice name to gather people around, it's not just about Ubuntu. If you look at the talks, many of them have nothing to do with Canonical and Ubuntu. It's about open source. That's it. Right? And it's very refreshing, right? We can talk about open source without having to talk about Ubuntu. Sure enough, if you come under our umbrella, we have tons of things for you, right? There's many ways you can contribute. Code, of course, documentation, translation, testing the releases, finding bug reports. So there's many ways you can actually help, but you don't have to be a part of the Ubuntu family. In fact, if you're more active doing a Linux user group, right, be my guest, reach out to us. We'll collaborate. We'll do something.
Talk to me about the collaboration that happened between DreamWorks and Microsoft. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but DreamWorks is giving a presentation on open sourcing Moonray, which is a rendering engine. And I think that caught some people by surprise because nobody really anticipated this large, massive mega corporation that produces Hollywood-grade films would open source their software, and yet they did. Unbeknownst to them, and no way they could have known this, but there is somebody sitting in the crowd from Microsoft, and afterwards, the guy from Microsoft goes up to the DreamWorks folks and says, hey, how in the world did you convince your company to do this? And DreamWorks was able to give them some advice, and something really cool came out of that. Tell me about that collaboration.
I'm sure I can talk that much about it when indeed you're referring to the previous summit where these individuals were in the room and realizing, hey, maybe there's something that can be done here. And I think at the end of the talk that anyone can watch on YouTube, you'll see the answer from the person working for DreamWorks saying, yeah, we do have a selfish interest in this. Of course, we work also with designers and artists, and we want them to be able to use our product, because unless it's open sourced, there's no way you can actually play with the product. So I think that was also a very inspiring message where you have this dual nature of a commercial entity, and he was very open saying, we make money with the films, we don't make money with the software. So what about releasing it? And simultaneously, I know you don't touch about this, but there was also a Microsoft talk about open source, and the minute they open sourced WSL, they saw an uptick, a massive uptick in the stars and the collaboration on the project. And that's, again, a perfect example of that. Once you open things up, people are more and more inspired and will use it more and contribute back to the community.
So DreamWorks open sources OpenRunray. Microsoft then open sources WSL. When DreamWorks got into a room with Canonical this week, something really cool happened. Tell me about that.
So yeah, we came up with a suggestion. Actually, I have to give credit to my team member Mauro, whom I'm sure for those who have been interacting with the Ubuntu community know him. Absolutely passionate guy. And Mauro thought, you know what, why don't I reach out to DreamWorks and see if they'd be interested to work more and build a snap. And he did reach out, and they loved the idea. So the concept was born out of this, of telling them, why don't you come a day before the summit, come and hack together, come into a room, and if you manage to come out with something, we'll mention it, and we have a talk at the summit, at the tail end of the summit. They came together, they hacked away, and actually in less time than they thought they needed, managed to ink out all the details, and we had the talk that you can watch on YouTube. So it sounds complicated, but it doesn't have to be, right? It's just this, if you think something is not doable, ask yourself twice the question, is it really not doable? Why would I not dare reaching out to Sebastian here? You're hearing me. DreamWorks, it may be massive corporations or, people who have, amazing backgrounds or what have you. Reach out. You never know. In fact, for the sake of the anecdote, I remember a few things. Same thing when I was reading, I think it was Daniel Kahneman's book. Daniel Kahneman had won the Nobel Prize of Economics for a number of behavioral studies and kind of stuff. He had written this bestseller book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Yeah, that's the book. And I love the book so much. It's a huge book. And I thought, I want to transform this into slides. I want to share that knowledge with others. I reached out to him and said, hey, can I use the content into slides? And the guy responded, right? So it turns out he did not own the rights for external verbal presentations, but he did take the trouble to write back to me. Right? I'm a nobody. Right? So this is just an anecdote, a digression from what we're talking about, but showing that people who may seem completely unattainable, unreachable, do not hesitate. For the other anecdote, I did write a personal handwritten letter to our dear friend Elon Musk in 2017, suggesting I could be a chief of staff for him. I thought he was quite inspiring back then before the latest of what was happening, I guess, over the past few years. But in 2017, I recall, I think I did write. I never heard back, though. I was trying to be original. I guess I should have probably used Twitter or X now. But anyway, you try, you fail, you try again. So back to DreamWorks, that's just a typical example. You may think, these are mammoth companies. Why would they care? Like, they're building films. Why would they care about this thing? And they have multiple interests, which are not antagonistic, contradictory with one another.
Some people may have heard your reference to you're hosting a conference inside of your office, and they're thinking, you can't host a conference inside of an office. But walking in here, you'd be surprised. Tell me about the office that we're in right now.
So we're right opposite the Tower of London, for those who've been lucky enough to visit. Otherwise, you can use images online. So there's the Thames River, there's the Tower of London opposite, and we're in these fantastically new glass skyscrapers or high-rise buildings. And Canonical has what I call the office space, which is actually a bunch of desks, but there's this event space kind of a cozy 60, 70 seater. Not really, can't really call it a room because it doesn't have doors. But you have to understand, I think, Mark's pure design style. So to give you a sense, I think it could be summed up as the following: wood, white, and I guess the Ubuntu orange, right? And imagine something very pure lines, very sober, right? In fact, in many ways, it's funny. It reminds me of some of the Google offices, not because of the flashy colors of Google, but if you visit any Google office, there's usually a style for every floor, every office. And there was a lot of attention to detail in this space here, right? So you have, as you come in through the reception, you will notice it's almost feels very empty. But if you pay close attention, you'll see little details, right? These little, I don't know, like flower or white flowers, like fake flowers on the wall, and a large Ubuntu logo, the circle of friends, but one only, right? Not everywhere. And Mark really paid a lot of attention to this detail. I think it speaks to his desire to focus on excellence. In fact, for those who have tried, and I know we get 1 million CVs at Canonical every year, you probably know that the hiring bar is extremely tough. I have a number of conversations with Mark about it because I have my opinion on it. But we get a lot of bad press on it on Reddit and Glassdoor. But it speaks to Mark's desire for excellence. Excellence in talks, excellence in the work that we want to deliver, excellence in the design, right? There's not a single thing that is out of place. It may not be perfect, and we learn from this, but every little thing here is designed to be as close to perfection as possible. With this like open, bare bones, but still gives a very comfortable feel. How did you feel when you came in? Was it the first time you saw it?
It was the first time I've seen it. I would tell you that everything is precise, right? And so you adequately summarize that it seems empty at first, but then you start noticing, oh, if I press on this part of this plain white wall, the wall opens up and it's actually a coat rack. And the one next to it is actually a storage thing for backpacks. And you go inside of, again, what looks like an event space with just plain walls. But no, there's a refrigerator built into the wall. You just don't know. You have to know where to press on the wall. The dishwasher is below and looks like that plain Ubuntu orange, but actually it opens up and you can load dish. In fact, I think there's 2 dishwashers. And I say that because I saw a little sign that says load this dishwasher first. So I'm assuming that there's another one somewhere, but I don't know where it is because you can't tell. The coffee makers, the only thing that you can see of the coffee maker is the dispenser and a small little touch screen that protrudes from the counter. Everything else is hidden from view. It was so shocking to me. My day job at Altispeed Technologies takes me into places where we install cameras and access control and access points and structured wiring and these sorts of things. And as I'm walking around, I'm looking around going, where is all of the stuff that makes this building work? And it took a moment with Juliana where I had to introduce myself to her and say, I have some questions. And she had to take me around to say, okay, great eye, but here's where all of this stuff is, and had to peel back the curtain a little bit for me to be able to see it and look into it because it is so meticulous. Every little piece is put together and put together with thought to the point that I think there's a bonsai tree at the end of the hall that we're in right now, but a bonsai tree needs to be outside. So they rotate them and they bring them outside and bring one in, I think she said every week.
Yeah, I believe this is part of Mark's personal collection. I think you described it much better than I did in terms of indeed everything is hidden from view in subtle ways. Yeah, absolutely.
It's really an experience to be here, and the wood is hand pressed. So at first I thought it must have been laser cut or something like that. No, it's friction fit. They cut individual pieces, and then I understood they got the wood from Japan and then had to send it to another country because there's only one country in the world that can do the oil to assemble the stuff, and then hired people to come in here and put it all together. I mean, it is it is a piece of art. It is. This building is a piece of art. And so to be here and to be able to walk around and see it in person is really incredible. And then to participate in the Ubuntu Summit has been really impactful.
I agree with you. I mean, don't want to give the wrong impression either. It's not a big space, right? But it's true that the space that it is in is exactly as you described it.
Sebastian Trzcinski-Clément. He is a guest this hour on the Ask Noah show. Sebastian, I am so happy to have the opportunity to meet you, and I'm sure our relationship will progress as time goes on. We'll get you back on the program soon.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Noah. Amazing conversation. I'm happy to have a chat anytime you want.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of October 19th, 2025, here's the Linux and open source news. pzip 10.7 has been released. Calibre 8.13 is out. Squid Proxy 7.2 is now available. The command line utility Less has released version 685. Digicam 8.8 is out. The GNOME team has announced version 49.1. Mozilla has released version 144 of both Thunderbird and Firefox. In distro news, Zorin OS 18 has arrived, and Tails 7.1 has been released. In open source security news, Sonatype has released the Open Source Malware Index for Q3 2025, revealing a total of 140% increase, or 34,000 new open source malware packages identified across major registries such as NPM, PyPy, and Hugging Face. An investigation into the compromise of AWS-hosted infrastructure has led to the discovery of a new GNU Linux rootkit dubbed LinkPro, according to findings by Synactive. Cybersecurity researchers at Trend Micro have uncovered a sophisticated attack campaign dubbed Operation Zero Disco that exploits a critical Cisco SNMP vulnerability to deploy Linux rootkits on network infrastructure devices. The U.S. cybersecurity company F5 have disclosed that unidentified threat actors broke into its system and stole files containing some of its big IP source code and information related to undisclosed vulnerabilities in the product. It is believed to be a nation-state actor. In open source AI news, Gaijin Entertainment has announced EdenSpark, an open source AI-assisted platform for making games. Cisco has unveiled Project CodeGuard, an open source framework to secure AI-written software. Google's open source RISC-V-based Coral NPU has been integrated into Synaptics SL2610 Edge AI system on chips. And lastly, open source AI tool by Yandex detects sign of infant cerebral palsy with over 90% accuracy. For the week of October 26th, 2025, MySQL 9.5 has been released. SuperTuxKart 1.5 has been announced. The KDE team has announced that KDE Plasma 6.5 has been released. In distro news, Fedora 43 is now available. And after the Windows 10 EOL, Zorin OS, a distro that targets Windows users with a very similar interface, saw over 300,000 downloads. In open source security news, Agenda ransomware deploys a Linux variant named Huilin on Windows systems through remote management tools and BYOVD techniques. In open source AI news, Lightrix releases LTX2, the first completely open source AI video foundation model. Minimax M2 is the latest LLM from the Chinese startup of the same name. It scores at or near the level of top proprietary systems like GPT-5 and Claude Sonnet 4.5. IBM Research has announced Malaya, an open source library addressing what they believe is a critical infrastructure gap in open source AI. And lastly, according to recent analysis, nearly 90% of Windows games now run on Linux through Proton.
Security Shop F5 said that a highly sophisticated nation-state hackers broke into its network and stole big IP source code, undisclosed vulnerability details, and customer configuration data that belonged to a small percentage of its users. While F5 didn't name the suspected nation-state in any of its disclosures, the Fed and private security researchers have recently accused both Russia and China of breaking into critical networks and stealing sensitive information. So, Steve, I think there's a couple of things here. So I think the first thing is that this is a big deal because F5 is so predominant in the enterprise space. But you notice something about the normalization of these breaches. Tell me about that.
So first of all, credit where credit's due. This is not my idea. I listen to a ton of podcasts, probably like a lot of our listeners, and somewhere along the way, I heard them discussing the fact that when we had very little regulation about what breach disclosure looks like, we would often get silence for a good period of time. And then when it was eventually disclosed, we would have sometimes a very technically dense disclosure that was kind of hard to parse, but it was out there for people to read. Nowadays, we have this idea that most countries have some level of regulation that say within X number of hours or days or weeks, whatever it is, you must have a disclosure from the time that you have discovered the problem. And what this has led to is corporations have started to, let's say, give you implicit safety assurances without actually saying it. So, for example, they'll come out and say, we're, such and such a company has had a breach. We are unaware at the current time that your financial data is taken, or we have no reason to believe that any customer data has been leaked. And they're playing this semantics game of, well, we haven't really looked hard enough, so we can't actually say for or against that we've actually had a significant data exfiltration. Therefore, it is safe for us to say we are unaware of this, whatever it is. We're unaware of that data leak. What this actually causes in the human psyche is most people are interpreting that as, I have no action to take. I must be okay because currently they don't believe that we are at risk, and most people go about their day. Where in fact, what we actually see is a continuing escalation of, last week when we said there wasn't anybody, well, it turns out there's 5,000 users. It's okay though, because we've got like a 5 million user database. And so 5,000 is like just a really small number. And then a week goes by and, remember how we told you it was 5,000? We actually meant it was like 100,000. And we have this kind of rolling update of how many people actually end up getting impacted by a breach. And this has a knock-on effect of when you're going to figure out when was the most recent breach. So I had a friend that was trying to figure out when was the last time that Salesforce was breached, as in the most recent time, because they've had enough of this in the last year and a half that it was kind of hard to figure out which one was actually the most recent because of this rolling release of we just have to update the data. It's now X number of people or whatever. It makes it very hard for people to parse out when the last time something bad has happened. So it was an observation of we've kind of normalized this idea that we will give people the feeling of safety without actually telling them that they're safe, because we know that's how humans are going to react if we word it in a specific way.
How did it work when the nerds were in charge?
Generally speaking, it was dense and most people weren't able to understand it except for other nerds.
But the information was there if you wanted it.
That's generally my recollection. I'm sure there were, let's say, less than truthful explanations in the past. But generally speaking, my recollection is I would go through some of the breach reports and actually be able to parse out what specifically was the problem and who was impacted.
And today this gets obfuscated in part because, let's assign some blame where blame is due. To a degree, companies are going to mitigate their exposure, right? They don't want to get sued. They don't want bad press. They don't want their name thrown under the bus. And I tell clients all the time, if you have customer data, it's likely not a function of if something is going to get popped and leaked onto the internet, it's when, right? And so if you have stuff that you can get off of your systems, and so PCI comes into play here, right? If you can get it off of your network, if you can get off of your system, if you can alleviate yourself from that hectic mess, do so. If you can't, take every possible precaution, every possible step that you can to try to keep yourself safe. But, especially in a day and age where everything exists on a cloud somewhere, it's just a matter of time before attackers get to it. I don't know that there's an actionable step. I don't know that there's anything that somebody can do. Is there?
That's a tough thing. No, I don't think that there is, right? If ultimately we're putting our trust in essentially black boxes these days, and if the black box doesn't inform you, you either can take the knee-jerk reaction of as soon as there is any hint of wrongdoing, you either jump ship and or take as many security precautions as you can given the system, or you just hope that you're not part of the data that got swept up in whatever malfeasance has happened.
Is there another option other than F5? And I don't say that to be oh my gosh, they screwed the pooch. And so it's not that. It's just anything is potentially up for, or could be compromised. So there's no guarantees anywhere. But are there other competitors to F5 that are maybe more open source friendly?
So, I mean, there are other competitors for, a handful of others. As for the open source angle, the only one that I'm really familiar with in that regard, I guess if I think about this, I'm not sure what MetalLB its status is. I know that Red Hat partners with them for some work inside of OpenShift, so we can deploy their software-based stuff inside of OpenShift. I would like to say that's open source, but I haven't actually looked. Shame on me. But the one that comes to mind that is widely deployed as open source is HA Proxy.
So we'll put a link to HA Proxy. You can check it out in the show notes. You can find those at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Should we see if we can grab some email?
Let's do it.
Our first email comes in from David. David writes in and says, yes, I know we are never ever to set the servers to DHCP, but my Proxmox backup server will be going to a friend's house hundreds of miles away. And I cannot guarantee that they'll change their router without informing me or would be able to handle Linux command line. How does one set up Proxmox backup server to use DHCP in a normal way? I searched to basically get no, don't do that with Proxmox PVE. Stupid search engine, not working with Boolean commands anymore stinks. The Proxmox backup server has Tailscale on it, and I use the magic DNS to access it. So because neither Steve nor I are Proxmox users, we are turning to the community in our Mumble room. You can find it at mumble.mindrep1.com. Joining us is Tiny. Welcome in, sir.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me about Proxmox backup server and how would one set that to DHCP if you didn't have control over the server and were shipping it elsewhere?
Yeah, so Proxmox has a couple of different products. One of them is their virtual environment, which is kind of like Hyper-V, or it's like a scaled up version of libvirt, where you have multiple hypervisor hosts and you have multiple virtual machines. And then Proxmox backup server is a way of taking incremental backups of those machines and verifying that those backups will restore when the time comes.
Awesome.
And if you wanted to, Proxmox virtual environment uses CoroSync and Ceph under the hood, which get really angry when you change the IP and things start to break. And so that's where all of that search engine information came from, saying, hey, never do this. But because Proxmox backup server doesn't have those clustering technologies, you can just go into Etsy network interfaces like it was a normal Debian box and set it to DHCP. You would just want to set the backup target to be the Tailscale IP or the Tailscale DNS name. So that way, every time that the client IP changes, you don't have to go into Proxmox and change the backup target.
Awesome. And would you send me some of the links to all of the fancy things so we can include those in the show notes?
Yep. I think I already sent them over to the producer.
Outstanding. So we'll have those for you available at podcast.asknoahshow.com. You'll find them there. Hey, the music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. We record the show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. You can join us live. Can't make it live? That's okay. We have the entire back catalog available for you. Podcast.asknoahshow.com. There you'll find all of the notes and resources that we used to put the show together, as well as everything going back to episode 1. We're back next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com. You want to stay up to date with the latest with me? Head over to noahc.us. We'll see you right back here next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com. Have a good week.